Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnackit.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnackit.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. We got a stacked show for you here once again this week. Man, we are at full throttle here at Black and Gold Banneret. Kyle Nash, the student of the game, is joining us here for the first segment. A little bit later, Bryson Turner is going to be with us to talk about what's been going on around UCF sports. But guys, we're coming off of the therapy session on night shift after the loss to Louisville. Kyle Nash putting us on the couch, examining things about what we're all thinking about this. I just wanted to tell you that you are very good at that, my friend.
I appreciate that. I said to Eric on Friday night, as much as I've been, putting you guys through your couples therapy on the show many times, resolving conflicts. I was glad to be there for the Night Nation as a whole on Friday. And listen, man, I find it interesting that the two presences that we had in the press box on Friday, one is the therapist and one is the Leroy Jenkins of Twitter. That's a hell of a mix.
I know. That's that's the yin and the yang, I think, are strong in this group. So we'll talk about we're going to start by sort of putting the final bow on the loss to Louisville last Friday and what UCF does from here, and then we're going to preview Florida Atlantic as well, coming up, the game in Boca Raton. On Saturday, UCF facing the Owls once again, who are 2-1 on the season under Willie Taggart. But guys, first, let's kind of, now that we have the benefit of hindsight and a couple of press conferences under our belt, Kyle and Eric, all right, what went wrong on Friday? We know about the penalties, obviously, and a few of them could be argued, but penalties are what they are. I see all the complaints about play calling, about quarterback play, and I go back to the same thing that you guys have waxed poetic on about, and that is, this team's offensive line is kind of struggling out the gate a little bit. We saw several times John Rice Plumlee, kind of running for his life and making plays, right? And was able to make plays. But when it came down to, and listen, Louisville, let's give some credit to Louisville. Defensively, that team is good. They can hit.
Oh, yeah.
We learned that last year, right? They make it a point to punish you on every down. And we learned that last year, and I think we learned that again this year. And this team's got some work to do, I think, especially up front in terms of figuring out the cohesion of this unit, Kyle. And I want to start with you because you have a particular set of experience on this. Where does this go from here? What needs to be done, and how do these issues get fixed in time for FAU on Saturday?
Right. Well, and a lot of what needs to be done, you've noticed happening. Like, first of all, to all the people that speak to play calling and personnel, Jeff's 100% right. It starts on the offensive line, it being a limitation. But Kyle, what does that have to do with not putting John and Richardson in the game more? Oh my God, he's so explosive. First of all, Coach Malzahn will agree with you that he's explosive. Jason Johnson, the linebacker, who said in the press conference Monday that the guy that's helped him most improve from battling against an offensive player throughout camp and this far into the season. Also mentioned Johnny Richardson. But gentlemen, one must keep an Isaiah Bowser on the field for one reason: to help in protection. How do you account for an offensive line that's struggling? Now, granted, I'm going to continue to put Matt Lee in a little bubble at center. He's fantastic. I really think in the next couple of years, we'll be having serious talks about him being an NFL center at one point. And I think he's got a better shot than Cole Schneider did when he was out with the Packers this past offseason. And that's not a shot at Cole Schneider. I think that's more about Matt Lee being a more complete athlete in terms of size and speed. But when when you have Bowser in there and he has to help in protection, which he did very well, by the way, I picked up a lot of blitzes that the Louisville sent on the outside, and to take some of the pressure off the tackles, which is their biggest struggling point, right? Grable and Swoboda, I believe they have their strength as athletes. They're both strong guys, but it's that pass protection that's problematic. And when you lose confidence as a tackle, which I'm glad to say I never had in a game situation where I lost confidence, because that's a rough place to be. I've had a rough day in some practices facing against the best defensive player on my team when I was playing at the time as one of the defensive ends. I've had some rough nights, and it sucks. I can only imagine what they're feeling now that they're in a situation not only where the quarterbacks are live, but when it actually counts versus, it being in practice. So I say all of that to say there's a mental aspect to knowing you have that help and you can concentrate more on what you're doing in front of you. But I really think it's agility, ironically. Despite their size, it's agility that becomes the problem. If you can't get your kicks back fast enough, your kick steps back fast enough to where you can stop a speed rush, and you're thinking about that too much, you end up kicking back. You're on your heels, and then what happens? The same thing that happened to Grable. You get pushed 5 yards back almost into your quarterback because the defensive end's like, hey, wait, this guy's worried about me being fast. And they attack your chest directly and dominate you that way. And then when that happens, you're in real trouble. The interior of the line that I've alluded to in the past being problematic is no longer the biggest problem. Sam Jack being kicked inside, for my money, appears to have been the correct move for all the criticism there is of Gus Malzahn and his scheme. That the inside is fantastic. All three interior linemen, in my mind, are doing fantastic. Loki is carrying his weight. There's a reason why he's on an award watch list. But for me, the tackles are definitely the struggle, and you're getting that attack from the edge. If you're noticing John Rice being flushed toward one side, normally you can escape if you're a fast quarterback, if you're flushed that way. But then when they both lose, where does he go? And there were plenty of those instances against Louisville on Friday.
Yeah, so, I thought, and I don't have the numbers to back this up, unfortunately, but I thought Louisville did a good job of, like, they decided to, on several occasions, they decided to bring the house and dare JRP to throw and test his accuracy. Sometimes it was on, other times it was not, but they brought pressure, and I don't care who you are, quarterbacks under pressure, your numbers are just not going to be as good. And the other thing, though, like you mentioned, I saw in the second half that Louisville even started pulling guys back because they were getting enough push with 4 and sometimes 3 guys. Mm-hmm. And that now, okay, if you're rushing 3, that means you're dropping 8, and good luck, because your receivers are all outnumbered. Eric, I want to go to you. You're Gus Malzahn. What are you pounding this week?
I think you're going to have to simplify some things, and you're going to really have to do some soul searching. And I think I felt like, you talked about therapy there, Kyle. I felt like Gus kind of went through his therapy with you in the media there on Monday. He took ownership of the loss, which I thought was fascinating. In fact, let's play the clip right now. Kyle, you asked Gus about, what was it, penalties you asked him about?
Well, right. To your point, he has owned penalties and it's his issue. And I wrote about it a little bit up in the preview that you'll see on the blackandgoldbanneret.com that dropped just before we were recording this. That states, listen, he's like, hey, listen, penalties is on me. I said we'd fix it after SCSU and we didn't. But I asked him if transfers and new faces are something that makes it more of a coaching challenge. And well, you could hear what he said.
Coach did mention penalties earlier, and kind of the situation with this particular roster is like you have a lot of guys who have obviously, are experienced players, are new on this campus per se. Is that anything that adds challenge when you're getting a lot of not only new faces but transfers coming in? Does that add to getting that right, making that right difficult? Or
I'd say maybe 1 week. That would be the first week. You're learning. Second week, I would say no. I'd say that's just part of coaching. That falls on me.
And now, as you could tell, I don't want to say I was trying to give him an out, but Coach Malzahn was having none of it. He put it right back on his shoulders, and he insists that it's on him, which, listen, there are coaches in the past, I don't want to mention any names to cause too much hype, but who would more dodge problems and try to put it to something other than
it's because I know football more than you and other players. It's all the players. They're not NGE, not good enough.
I knew that was coming.
Well,
never my fault. Just because I had 2 winless seasons. Not my fault. I have a statue.
Oh my god!
Hey. I should have 2 statues. What?
I won't try to compete as far as who could do the better invitation. I never attended one of those pressers, but I've heard it. But
legendary, let me tell you.
With Malzahn, listen, man, he I think you said it best, Elo. He knows how to talk to fans. Well,
I think he understands they're ticked off.
Yeah,
and I think he's ticked off. That was a bad loss. I mean, sorry, this ain't Louisville basketball. They're okay. That team is the poster boy, Kyle, of why you don't like the ACC. It's a team that is not very good. Nobody left that stadium saying, wow, that team is really good. Yet they're going to win 7 games and go to the Belk Bowl. The disappointing thing is you lose that game at home. Penalties was a big part of that, not discipline, right? Think about the penalties that took away touchdowns. That's a concern.
Yes.
Offensive line, which you have addressed, not only here, but you and Drew have addressed this since camp. That's a big issue because basically Louisville's like, yeah, we're going to put pressure on you because we don't respect your offensive line. Yep. Quarterback is still an issue. We don't know if we have one. He was John Rice Plumlee, not consistent. He missed some throws. There was one to Alec Holler in particular in the first half that he's got to complete.
I thought even on the final offensive play of the game, you could hear the crowd, kind of like, go, go. They saw sort of the Red Sea kind of part. Right. And where he had an opportunity to run for it on 4th and 5, and instead he threw it. He tried to get the ball into, I think it was Xavier Townsend, and Xavier, I think, was double covered on the play, and he made it. And I think Gus talked about that after the game. That's kind of that's the learning curve at work, right? He hasn't played quarterback in over 2 years.
But do you have time to develop a guy, and can a guy, because you don't just become accurate in 1 week. You take a quarterback like Jordan Travis at Florida State. He's in his 3rd year, basically. Now is when you're starting to see him being somewhat accurate, and the jury is still out on him even then. So that's a question mark.
How much of the accuracy questions a function of him having to run around like a maniac being chased by people?
I think some of that, but some of it is also he only makes one read. It seems like he likes to go to Javon Baker, and if he's not there, he tucks it. And that's kind of a lot of athletes that play the quarterback position that don't have the experience or don't have the reps tend to do that early.
Because you make a point there that's completely accurate that those guys do exist. But and listen, I've been the guy giving Jeff the hardest time with his JRP propaganda on this show.
That's true. Very valid.
Really?
Very valid.
Okay.
Very valid.
The one place I will defend Jeff and his beloved JRP. I'm kidding, boss. The one place where I will defend John Rice Plumlee here is Ryan O'Keefe not being involved in that 4th quarter due to injury.
That's another one
getting a little ignored. Now, where I'll turn it on its head and be critical. As much as people talk about play calling, and as much as I am annoyed by people who think they know even as much as Gus Malzahn, who's literally written a book on the sport that other coaches have adopted as a way of life. by the way. The where is one question I would put on there, and that's in that very same series, gentlemen. Isaiah Bowser comes up limping. You have 2 timeouts. Why are you panicking and putting JRP in a position to have to throw a pass there? Call timeout.
Right. And I think that's where Gus was alluding to in the pressers too, where I think I think he's got to realize what he has at quarterback, and he's going to have to scale some things back, simplify some things, help him out a little bit better, because you can't look, whether you're a pro JRP, not pro, there's some throws he can't make. I think we can all agree on that. There's some throws he just can't make. So don't call those plays. How about that? That's a crazy concept.
Well, I mean, I don't think Gus is out here, calling plays that he knows his quarterback can't run. I think one of the other things, though, and you mentioned Ryan O'Keefe getting banged up, Kobe Hudson was nowhere to be seen either. He didn't even play. He was a scratch.
Well, we don't know when he'll play.
We don't
again.
know.
Right,
so we don't know. Did we get any? By the way, did we get any update on O'Keefe or Hudson, Kyle?
Hudson on Monday said that he wasn't playing because he's dealing with a personal issue, which, I know we speculate a lot here in the media, but let's just say percentage-wise, when you hear that, it's typically not a good thing. And then Ryan O'Keefe, we've heard it's a hamstring. We're not sure if he's going to be back in time for FAU or not, but hamstrings are always tricky, especially when you're a guy like Ryan O'Keefe. It's an injury I've suffered in the past. Myself, and even as a non-fast guy, air quotes.
I was going to say, yes, you were quite fast, but I don't know if you're Ryan O'Keefe fast.
Yeah, hey, listen, I'm awesome for a 300-pounder, baby. See, I'm not even 300 pounds anymore, so maybe I run like the wind. I'm kidding, but no. Listen, in his case, what makes it tough, especially when we'll put it this way, where you make your living running. Hamstrings are tough because you never really know when you're back until you test it, and it's real easy to retweak that stuff. So that's definitely a tough situation.
That right there. All right, that's 2 weapons that you're without.
Right. It is. I hate to break it news, though. I hate to break this. I don't know, and Caillou can confirm this. Football is tackle football. Injuries will happen. And I kept being told all fall camp we have so much depth that we could lose a bunch of guys and we'll be fine. That's not the I want to bring up, though, a part that nobody brings up because it's not exciting in podcasts. Quarterback's the easy thing to focus on in the offense. If you make a 32, 33-yard field goal and actually play better on special teams, maybe we don't have this conversation. And that's
maybe you had 2 long touchdowns called back, a 57-yarder from Johnny.
I'm just saying special teams in general,
and then a 75-yarder to Baker that got called back.
But I'm saying special teams is a big issue on this team.
Special teams. The penalties on blocking. Real problem.
To me right now that's another concern because again you saw the special teams cost them the Navy game last year.
Well, that's true, but
I just think you have to be. Bill Parcells always said you got. There's 3 aspects of the game. Offense, defense, and special teams that can win you or lose you games.
No, and listen, all that's true from a football, what's his word, commandment standpoint, right? But I can't, as far as this game, listen, watching Obarski miss the chip shot has to be annoying for UCF fans in general. I 100% understand. However, in this game, listen, that's 3 of 14 points that are left. I should say
17
points. Now we're up to 17.
Right, which could make a difference perhaps in that last drive because then you don't need a touchdown. You could have kicked the field goal, hypothetically.
Points, who cares about the field goal? Now, to join you on this, though, Eric, and be completely fair with you that special teams are a problem, and I think we agreed with this on Friday when we talked about it, there's a little bit too many Butterfingers.
Agreed. In field position, right? Field position wasn't good because you don't get good returns because you don't handle returns. I'm saying that as a whole special teams. I'm not talking one aspect of special teams. Yeah,
and that's more for the audience at home that we discussed that too, Eric. I know you know better, but let's put it this way: they managed to avoid catastrophe too this time. But when that's a turnover, and if they have the same differential with FAU, oh God,
right.
So. That said, okay, here's my silver lining to the dark cloud. All right. We don't know how good Louisville is going to be. Number one. We don't know. right
Yeah,
now.
I know. We know.
We'll find it. No, we don't.
Mediocre.
We don't know. Maybe Satterfield turns it
baby.
around. I don't know. Number 2, they were the more desperate team. And that was the one thing about this game that kind of frightened me coming in was beware the more desperate team.
That's such a
Number
media
3,
cliche. That's media cliche.
It's not a media
I read.
cliche.
I read on the Black and Gold Banneret about revenge. Revenge.
I get that.
I think that's a cop out. Like nobody was saying
that's-
Louisville was the
that's
more
a
desperate
real-
team
that's a
when
real
UCF was
thing.
up 14-7 outplaying Louisville. Like UCF should have put the game away in the first half and didn't. They let them hang around. That's the story.
Here's the other thing is despite all the stuff that went wrong, UCF had 2 shots in the fourth quarter to win the game.
Yes.
And didn't come up with it.
Yeah.
In a 1-score game, right? It wasn't like they got blown out of their own building. All right. So, I mean, and you know how I like to talk about, football all the time. A lot of these games you can decide on the flip of a coin. If the Jalen Griffin play in the back of the end zone gets called a little bit differently, right? If they call touchdown instead of interception, right? And that's the call on the field and they review it, guess what? We're standing here
by the way,
saying,
let's
hey,
clear that
we won one. That was a big win. It was a little tight, but we got out of here with one, right?
I do want to follow up on that. That was never going to be a touchdown. From the rule book, all they were reviewing.
I'm not talking about the ruling. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying if some people are like that,
a different way.
Sure, but I'm just saying some people thought that should have been ruled to a touchdown. That was never going to be reversed to a touchdown. They were reviewing whether it was an interception or an incomplete pass.
It should have. And by the way, for the record, it should have been ruled incomplete,
which would have made a difference because that would have put the ball at the 6.
The 4, actually, would have been on the 4.
Right, so that that is significant, and I thought it should have been an incomplete pass.
Yeah, no, that call was completely blown. You guys definitely have that right. And with the way the defense was playing, like, listen, as much as I've been banging my drum about how much I predicted for this game, I'm going to throw all the credit in the world to JJB, Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, and the linebackers for handling business. Oh, but Kyle, they gave up the long touchdown to Malik Cunningham, who Coach Gus Malzahn said is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. By the way, your FSU Seminoles better watch out, Lopez. I'm just saying.
The ACC, you know this. They all beat each other up and go 7-5 and play for the Belk Bowl.
No, and listen, I love that you've maintained that narrative because
you've warmed me up, but you've won me over. I've walked into your side on ACC football.
Welcome to the dark side. We have cookies there. Anyway, but with Malik Cunningham breaking off one big touchdown after the 4th or 5th punt in a row where you would eventually have 7, right? That's kind of awesome considering what Malik Cunningham.
No, they played well.
The defense kept UCF in the game. There's no doubt about that. I think you got to be.
But they're going to play way better offenses than Louisville coming up. And especially in a few weeks when SMU comes to town, way better offense. So this defense I still think has to be tested. And you know what? They're going to be tested a little bit this weekend in Boca.
All right. Well, that's a wonderful transition, Eric Lopez. Thank you for that segue because that takes us to the FAU Owls, who have played 3 games on the season. Remember, they played in week 0. They have scored this season so far. They're 2-1, beat Charlotte and Southeast Louisiana last week. Lost at Ohio in week 1. But their point totals this year, guys. And granted, yes, let's account for the opponents. But 43, 38, 42. Willie Taggart is known for that. All right. He's known for putting together a team that can score points. We know that from his time at South Florida. 7:30 p.m. kick in Boca, CBS Sports Network. All that mentioned, this is okay. Let me let everybody behind the curtain here a little bit. Okay. We had a little discussion earlier yesterday on Tuesday about whether this is a quote trap game, end quote. Eric, of course, is going to say that's a made up media.
Well, Kyle and I are on the same boat on this.
Kyle actually agrees with him on this. I'm saying
it's bastardized. There's a difference.
Okay. Let me make the case. I think from the fan base's perspective, okay, everyone's thinking, all right, we had 8 days between this and the Louisville game. We know what we have to fix. Now we have to go fix it. And you know what? We're going to have a lot of this stuff ironed out in time for a Conference USA opponent. Even though it's on the road, you know something, we'll have this fixed. And
I don't think some fans actually think that way.
I'm just saying, well, listen, road games in state, you know, this is a pretty good FAU team here. I'm not saying that they're going to compete for the G5 New Year's Six bid.
Jury's out on that still, but
okay. Well, the jury's just as much out on them as it is on Louisville. Let's put it that way.
Agreed. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
But they're going to come out fired up, right? Because you know I think they smell a little blood right now, and if UCF doesn't jump on them real quick, and you do exactly what you say, Eric, remember, letting them hang around.
Oh, yeah.
Things can get a little dicey, right?
No, I agree 100% with all that. That doesn't make this a trap game, though. A definition of a trap game is when things are going well and you look past the opponent to the next opponent and you kind of like, oh, wait, that's a tricky game. This team lost. So there's no, like, looking past anybody. You're not in that position at all.
That's a coaching problem, by the way.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, FAU has a good quarterback, Perry, who's the transfer from Miami. Good playmaker.
Yep.
The Willie Taggart comment. I mean, obviously, you must have deleted the Florida State years there as far as offense is concerned because there was none of that while he was there. But look, this is FAU's Super Bowl, so you know they may actually, you know, they'll have a sellout. Maybe half a crowd will actually be FAU fans because the rest of them are retired at home in retirement homes in Boca Vista. But that being
Let's just
said,
hand them bulletin board material instead, right, Eric? Come on, jeez.
But that being said, you're right about this. There is pressure on UCF to get off to a good start, and you know FAU is not a very good pass defense. They've given up a lot of yards, so you know that FAU is going to try to put a ton of people on the box and try to blitz. You know what's coming. Has UCF improved enough on that? And if they don't, is there going to be that? Oh boy, you know, is that going to be that? Yeah. Stressful. No, that I think you're right. We're going to know within the first quarter and a half what kind of night it is, because if Plumlee doesn't get off to a good start, there's going to be some rumblings about the quarterback. Does the offensive line, are they having issues with FAU? I do think defensively they might run it. You know, FAU has some nice skill position players that could pose some, you know, threats here. So you're right. You know, if you let them hang around, that becomes a very dangerous situation because then FAU will gain more confidence as the game goes on.
FAU right now 91st in the country in passing yards allowed, 108th in team pass efficiency defense. Although on the other side of the ledger, N'Kosi Perry is hitting on 62% for just shy of 900 yards, so just shy of 300 yards a game, 9 touchdowns, 2 picks. And they also have Larry McCammon, their running back, who's averaging 100 yards a game. So now, again, I will repeat this. This is against the likes of, God, who do they play? Charlotte, Southeast Louisiana.
Lost to Ohio, didn't they? Yeah, they lost to Ohio.
Yeah. In Athens, Ohio, at the very tail end of the game. Gave up 4 touchdown passes in that game. 41. Yeah. And by the way, they were down 41-24.
Yeah.
In the fourth quarter. That game actually came back to make it tight. So I mean, I don't know. We're going to find out what UCF team. You know, I do think that we could call this, Kyle, a gut check game, right?
No, that's fair.
I agree with that. That's fair.
Yeah, all right. You lost by 1 at home in a game that in several different areas you could have said, flip of a coin, we win. What do? Do you end up getting beat twice? Or do you turn around, go down south, and take care of business?
Yeah, no, that's 100% an accurate assessment. And listen, I think that's what Sam Jack was getting to. Sam Jackson, of course, the starting guard and 60-year player, I believe. You know, veteran for the offense in general, not just the offensive line. He said he hopes that the offense gets aggressive in practice to what's his word, kind of attack the problem rather than feel like their backs are against the wall. It's like, no, listen, we can take care of it here. It's on us to find the problems and be aggressive about
get after it.
Them. Yeah. And I another point I wanted to raise too is, as much as people are talking about, oh, well, it's in state. Hey, listen, the crowd at the end of the day is still going to be louder for the offense and you try to cause miscommunication, and you don't get that at home. So I mean, sure, it means a bus ride instead of a plane ride. Sure, it means less time to get home and less time to get there, and less discomfort perhaps in making a trip. But during the game itself, I think that a little bit too much is made of the fact that it's in state, and
especially there's going to be a good UCF turnout there at Boca.
Yeah,
like it was last time they're there. Hopefully the stadium has improved some of the things. Last time there was a ton of complaints.
Well, the big complaint last time was there weren't enough points of entry, and so a lot of people were having trouble getting into the stadium in time. So there were a lot of people who were stuck outside in the line waiting to get in until the second quarter. So yeah, I agree with you, Eric. I would hope that FAU has had that worked out.
It's important. Remember, FAU is going to the American Conference next season, so
they better figure that out.
Right, and that's why, like I said, I think for FAU this is a measuring stick. How do we stack up against the team in the American and all that? So it's going to be an interesting game. CBS Sports Network, so be prepared for 10 years of worth of commercials. Kyle, I hope you've got caffeine on you, brother.
Listen, I'm bummed. My graduate school professor Dave Ryan is not doing this game. I'm bummed about that, but yeah, this is a big gut check game here. So, all right, well, let me ask the two of you before we go to break, and Kyle, I want to start with you. How's this thing play out?
Listen, the difference here with FAU is that they have a balanced offense. That's what's going to be more challenging. Not to take anything from Malik Cunningham, but he has yet to complete a passing touchdown. So too, I was reaffirmed in talking to the Orlando Sentinels, Matt Murschel.
Name dropper.
The other night. Well, hey, listen, I mean, I got to talk.
Might want to pick up that name over there.
Listen, he's a wiser college football mind than I am. I want to give him credit.
Who had the better suit, you or Matt?
Oh, well.
Oh, for God's sake.
Here's the thing. He's the Baron of the bow tie.
I saw Drew complaining about, hey, we need polo. And I'm like, oh, boy, that sounds to me like Kyle brought his
I'm working on it, for crying out loud.
Why? I mean, Kyle likes a suit anyway. You're a suit guy, Kyle, as long as I've known you. I don't know you without a suit.
Well, let's be careful. I don't wear a jacket to the game in Florida. I'm not in full suit. I reserve that for bowl games and championships, okay? But
wow, okay. I didn't know you had like good grounds, levels there of gear.
Oh, hey, listen, if I go back to an NY6, my game's got to get stepped up.
So you have different clothes for New Year's Six versus like
okay. This is one step above talking about press box food. Let's get back to the point that we're trying to make here, Kyle.
No, but with Malik Cunningham having only completed one passing touchdown, there's room for criticism of Louisville's pass game. With FAU, they're a bit more balanced. 9th in total offense, according to Coach Gus Malzahn, definitely a threat. Offensively, this might be a game where I look for UCF to actually physically dominate because they have bigger athletes in this instance. So if the offensive line can't physically dominate an FAU, boy, we got bigger problems. And listen, guys, you've asked me in different permutations the question of what can they do to get better. I mentioned some of the cohesion and short-term things that they can do. The real answer is Gus Malzahn keeps talking about recruiting like his hair's on fire, and we've seen him do that in the skill positions. I hate that. It's such a slur against offensive linemen, but I digress. But dude is going to need to become a chef, a butcher, if you will, and find some beef. And if because he's managed to do it on the defensive side, the offense needs some of that beef in the middle, on the line in the trenches, and it needs to be aged properly so it can be seasoned to protect quarterbacks of the future. Boom! Try that analogy.
That's like almost skirting on the border of a dad joke in a way. It's like,
well, there is such a thing as skirt steak there, Jeff Sharon.
Oh God! All right, Eric, save me from this. How do you see this one playing out?
I think UCF needs to win and win comfortably. Otherwise, because you're going to get tougher games moving forward. Like SMU's coming in a couple weeks. that's more talented. You've got Cincinnati, who we've portrayed them as having a bunch of walk-ons, and yet they should have beaten. They were right there with Arkansas. It was pretty good. So schedule's going to get tougher, and there's really no room for error. I think that's Kyle makes a lot of good, valid points as far as if things don't go well, what it could mean.
SMU, by the way, they're at Maryland on FS1 on Saturday night, and then home for TCU the week after. That's before
big 2 weeks for SMU. They're really
I feel like the jury's still out on them because yes, they scored a bunch of points in their 2 games, but it's been against North Texas and Lamar.
Well, the whole jury's out on the American. It's been a disappointing start. Houston loses a bad game at Texas Tech where they give up a 4th and 20 in overtime. Meanwhile, and right now they're playing from catch-up as far as having any shot for New Year's Six because the Sun Belt is on fire with their big weekend last weekend.
Yeah, right now there's only 2 teams in the American that are 2-0, SMU and Tulane. Everybody else is 1-1 except for Navy, who's 0-2.
With no quality wins to speak of. That's a problem. So that's disappointing. And that's good. I guess you can look at it from a UCF perspective. That's good news. It's wide open. But then you're all like, man, it's just can this stuff get fixed? So we'll see.
Eric, you were saying
Texas go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you were saying Texas Tech. I believe you mean UTSA, yes?
No, Texas Tech. They played in Lubbock this weekend with Tim Brando on the call. Texas Tech beat Houston in overtime because the iron was unkind to Houston. It actually wasn't.
Houston hasn't played at home yet, and the game you're referencing to, Kyle,
was the opener against UTSA where they were 4.
Where they did win it in overtime in the Alamo Dome, and then so 37-35, and then they lose to at Texas Tech in Lubbock 33-30 last week. So
I mean, hey, listen,
2 coin flip games there for Houston, right?
Yeah, at least Texas Tech is a team in a major conference. And
no, they are. It's just what's disappointing. It's very similar to UC. It's an opportunity. There's high expectations there, game. And they didn't hold on to it. And again, when you look at what Appalachian State has done, beating Texas A&M, that win is going to carry water all year. Marshall beats Notre Dame. You got Georgia Southern beating Nebraska, basically putting the final nail in the coffin of the Scott Frost era. The Sun Belt, right now, if they take care of business, say Appalachian State wins out or whatever, they're going to be the New Year's 16. The Americans in trouble in that regard. They don't have any of those wins that comes close to that right now, if we're being honest. And that's concerning if you're the American, because your goal is for your champion to at least be at a New Year's Six bowl.
Yeah. And it's the other thing, if you're Houston, you're looking back at this game and thinking, man, we had this, because they had a 2017 lead with 37 seconds to play and then gave up a 6-play drive in 30 seconds, basically, to surrender what was the game-tying field goal that sent it to overtime. So the American, well, like I said, if you're UCF, and I said this on Twitter after the game in Louisville, hey, all the stuff that you can control if you're UCF, and you always talk to me about that, Eric, right? Mm-hmm. All the stuff that you can control is still within your control and in front of you.
Right. Just improve on the areas, and we'll see what looks.
From there. So, now, speaking of things that you can control or cannot control or whatnot. Actually, I don't know how that segue plays in, but the news came down this week. Scott Frost has been fired by the University of Nebraska. They elected not to wait 3 more weeks until October the 1st and paid $7.5 million extra dollars to get rid of him after their loss to Clay Helton's Georgia Southern Golden Eagles. The
Sun Belt, baby.
I'll tell you, when we look back at Scott Frost in Nebraska, much has been made about this, obviously. Him being, basically leaving UCF for the only job he would have left UCF for at the time. I think we all know that. At the end of the day, guys, as we wrap up this first segment, did he make a mistake?
No. You never make a mistake when you chase your dream. That's the thing. That's why I'm very somber about this, although he's going to be fine financially. I get all that. But this was his dream job, and we should be encouraging people to chase their dreams, not discourage it. Unfortunately, if Nebraska was still in the Big 12, I think he would have been successful. But Kyle, I know you've alluded to it.
Good point.
His system, I don't think, fits in the Big 10. It never did. They never really got the talent there to match up because the Big Ten, it's Ohio State's conference, all right? You're not going to out-recruit Ohio State. You're probably not going to out-recruit Michigan. You may not out-recruit Michigan State. You still have Wisconsin. I mean, now, so whereas in the Big 12, I think Nebraska was always a fit. They could get people from Texas. And, that's one of the concerns with all this realignment stuff. Our schools are taking the money, but is it really a good fit? And I don't think Nebraska has ever been a good fit for football in the Big Ten. So that's part of it. That being said, I think his loyalty to Eric Chinander kind of caught up with him. He never replaced him defensively. They've struggled there. The black shirts have never been black. They've played more like, opposite of black shirts, whatever that is. But I'm bummed out about it personally because it's his dream job. I know some UCF fans are taking pleasure in that, but I actually think this hurts UCF.
A lot of Schadenfreude out there.
And I understand how maybe some things were handled perfectly at the end and all that, but I would argue that Scott Frost failing at Nebraska actually hurts the UCF brand because if he was successful, that helps the UCF. I want UCF coaches that leave here to do well because it shows that, hey, UCF's got good coaches. You can coach here. It helps the whole thing. Now, by him not basically coaching well, there's going to be some out there. They're like, you see, that 2017 team was all a fluke. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't agree, but that's going to be how good could they have been?
I think anybody who argues that's doing so in bad faith.
It's college football fans. That's what they do. That's what
and
they
I
do.
get that. I get that. Like, it should, if it wasn't called football, it would be called bad faith. But
I'm not saying it's that, but I'm just saying there'll be some critics out there about that. But more importantly,
you know what? They can cry more because we got the banner. So deal with it.
Yeah, that's a banner.
Go ahead, Elo. I'm sorry.
Well, my last point, for some there that are taking pleasure in the Scott Frost thing, I will ask you this question. How many New Year's Six bowl games has UCF won since Scott Frost left? 0. How many undefeated seasons have they had since Scott Frost left? 0.
Well,
including bowl games.
Okay.
I think we should appreciate what he did in those 2 years, but especially that year, especially going back and forth when he didn't have to for the Peach Bowl. Remember, he was recruiting and then coming back. I just think we got to let some of the fan base has to let some of that stuff go. So I'm not.
Milton, I thought made a great point. He kind of came to Scott Frost's defense, and on Twitter, and you can take a look at that.
Mackenzie doesn't come here without Scott Frost.
That's right. So bottom line, yeah, and I feel terrible for Scott. Like you said, you chase your dream job. That's what and Lord knows he was given the resources. It just didn't work. And I tell you the truth, it comes down to what I've said about programs like Nebraska and other programs in the SEC and the Big Ten that just go that go through coaches with these. Auburn's a great example. Nebraska is one of those programs that is too big to fail, and you have a lot of cooks that are back there in terms of the donors and all that kind of stuff who want things done a certain way. And the coaches are not allowed to coach. They are forced into making certain decisions. They're forced into keeping certain people happy rather than actually being allowed to just coach the team. And I think that was the case in Nebraska. And the proof of them being too big to fail is the fact that if they waited 21 more days, it would have only cost them $7.5 million. I say only. It would have cost them $7.5 million to fire Scott Frost. They couldn't wait that long, and they decided to fork over twice that amount of money to make him go away.
I'm sure that's what they'll say publicly, Jeff, but a part of me can't help but feel like that they want to take care of Scott Frost as a son of Nebraska.
And Trev being a fellow alum, that's an interesting theory.
And that's a good point, actually. I didn't think about that.
And moreover, in doing that and taking care of him, he's less inclined to badmouth that very sort of occurrence taking place.
I think that's fair. I think so. I think that's fair.
An interesting point.
Well, and some people have said that Trev kept Scott this year because he wanted it to work. Now, I think the writing was on the wall when basically forced Scott to bring in Mark Whipple to call plays. Anybody that covered Scott Frost, and you did, Kyle, and I did, there's nothing that Scott loves more than calling plays.
Oh, yeah.
And you knew that, like, after the Northwestern game, where he's pretty much taking shots at Mark Whipple's play calling, like, yeah, we could have done this, should have done this better. Unfortunately, when you start taking away a coach's kind of some of their stuff they like to do, that's the writing on the wall. In retrospect, they probably should have parted ways at the end of last season. But I think you're right. I think out of loyalty, they probably try to see if they can make it work this year. And you're right. That's a good point, Kyle.
And listen, I'll put it this way: from a football standpoint, and I'm not somebody who's dancing on the grave of the Nebraska portion of Scott Frost's career. Listen, Frost is the first coach that I covered as being a member of a beat regularly, and the dude was awesome, incredibly likable. I learned a few things about the game of college football just from listening to him in press conferences, and then Malzahn arrived, and I learned a lot more. But I think something I've said that I think holds true is that style of finesse football doesn't fly in the Big Ten.
I agree.
Because the size that you need to battle these corn-fed dudes in the trenches that they got, not only on the line, but then Penn State as linebacker you and all this other stuff, all these other guys will bash the center of those offenses and break through. This is why you see Stanford regularly upset Oregon. Why is Oregon relevant? Scott Frost came from there eventually. That style of finesse offense is a thing. I like the point made that he would have done better in the Big 12, perhaps. But at the end of the day, I didn't feel like he was going to succeed in the Big 10. I have a theory. I'm going to test that theory against somebody I'm hoping to talk to this weekend. But let me also...
Another name dropping. Go ahead, name drop it.
I haven't dropped the name yet. I'm just teasing it might come. But I'll add this to it as well. You mentioned Mackenzie Milton not making it into the fold without Scott Frost. Let me tease another conspiracy theory that I'm going to run past you guys when Drew's back on Saturday on and around the FAU game there when we're talking about that on night shift. I can argue that there's not been a truly great offensive lineman to come into the building since Scott Frost, except for maybe one.
I have to go back and look at it. I will say one thing. Let just real quick, rapid fire before we go here to wrap up the segment. UCF offensive analyst Scott Frost, yes or no?
No. Alabama offensive analyst probably is the more accurate.
Why is Nick Saban like the
No, you joke, but that's a smart move. Like I do think the next chapter of Scott Frost is going to be fascinating. What does he do? Does he take time off from football? Does he want to be an assistant in college? Does he reunite with Chip Kelly, for example, at UCLA? Does he go with Nick Saban and be an analyst and get rehabbed, if you will? Because as we've seen, if you are within a 5-mile radius of Nick Saban, you're going to get hired. So that's part of it. Does he want to maybe take a low assistant position in the NFL? There was always whispers that his ultimate goal was to be in the NFL. Does he want to be
in the NFL? So.
Right. Does he want to be a head coach at a non-Power 5 school? Maybe a job in Tampa will open real soon. That he's had success in the state of Florida. I really am interested.
Did you imagine?
Well, what do you do?
Oh my God!
So let me ask you both. I mean, what do you think? What do you think he'll do, or what do you think he should do? I'm really fascinated what he does next.
So,
go ahead, Kyle.
First of all, Elo, as much as you call out conspiracy theories and media hype, this stuff about him going to a non-Power 5 school to head coach, that's media hype, and I'm a little...
You don't think he'll ever go back then? You think it's above him?
Not to USF? God, no.
No, okay, not maybe, just in general. I'm just saying, but I just throw out USF because I do think that job's going to open.
Here's where I will defend you. If the Sun Belt is continuing to rise like we're talking about, there's an outside 10% chance. But Scott Frost has done too much. Listen, the other piece, all the sentimentality that we talk about where Tom Osborne came and was the final convincing straw that eventually broke the back of his going to Nebraska. Listen, I buy all that. I think that's how it happened. But let's not act like the goal of even considering Nebraska was not a long-term job move to get into a Power 5 program to add to his resume. And while I would love Scott Frost, offense analyst, I will dive at the chance to make it to those press conferences to talk to him again. We all know the smart thing to do is to concentrate on his career. Alabama, if he can pull it off, is the correct mark. I'll give you this. I don't like the concept in my mind for his career of going with Chip Kelly, but we've also seen sentimentality is on his mindset as well. If he gets to Alabama, he's going to do that to advance his career. And then if that goes well, the sky is the limit. I think we see him in the NFL too. Go ahead, Jeff.
If I'm Philip Montgomery at Tulsa, I better win some games this year.
That's true.
He's another one under fire, yeah.
Because if Scott is Nebraska's native son, right, and his scheme works better at a G5 level, Tulsa's located in Oklahoma, not far from Nebraska.
The big thing for Scott, though, he's got to be committed. If he's going to go back to being a G5 head coach, is he committed to that? Because there's coaches that go to the Power 5, get a taste of it, and then struggle going back to the G5. So
that's true. That's true. I think
so
we
is
saw that
he
with Charlie Strong?
Yes,
an example of that.
Yes.
That doesn't. Also, it doesn't necessarily mean that maybe head coaching is the thing for him. Maybe he goes somewhere to be an offensive coordinator.
Could be.
Maybe. I don't know which teams are really are going to be hurting for an offensive coordinator.
I think the most likely person that
I
think the most likely person that could return to UCF of all this, Sean Beckton.
Yeah, I could see that.
In some capacity.
Playing out that, because Sean's been coaching for a long time now.
Yeah. But not Scott. I don't see Scott coming back.
I don't know. It's he's got a lot going on, so let him. He's got
to heal. He's got to heal because that it stinks.
Because now, you've been fired by your hometown, your school, the school that you grew up as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, wanted to play for and eventually coach. And it's over now. So what do? It's like you are going all the way back to square one. So
I don't know about all the way back to square one. He has a nice resume to consider too. And
I get that. But when it just hits different when your place says, all right, you're done. Like think about Heupel at Oklahoma, right?
Right.
But he's bounced back, though.
To his credit, he bounced back. But where did he go after that? South Dakota, right?
Got to Missouri, then got the UCF job.
Got to Missouri, moved his way back up.
Right. What is Scott willing to do? That's what we don't know. And he has to figure that out. But the good news for him, he's going to have $15 million while
he could. If I was him, I'd just go to the Bahamas.
We could make room for him here on the Black and Gold Banneret. He could be an guest analyst here with Kyle right?
Yeah.
We can push Drew to the side here, It could be Kyle and Scott. Kyle and Scott in the post.
No, listen. I would be all in on a Kyle, Scott Frost, and Drew night shift type or Tuesday night, recap or wind down or something. Listen, Scott. I don't know if you're listening, but if you're
are you sending the offer? Are you sending the invitation right now?
If you're bored, you know where to find us. We were there, so, hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Anyway.
I think it's more likely that he'll replace Nathaniel Hackett in Denver based off of this.
Oh boy. That's, man. Wow. That's a good place to end this segment on, because as I also said on Twitter, no matter how bad you may think it gets, it could always be worse.
Right on.
So, all right, we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez back with you, and joining us now, a member of the UCF Twitter Mafia, even though he covers FIU and some FAU for Underdog Dynasty, our sister site on SB Nation, co-managing editor of Underdog Dynasty and podcast host. UCF graduate Eric Henry joining us. What's up, Eric? How are you, man?
Oh, man, I don't know if I'm worthy of that introduction, but you know what, Jeff and Eric, I am going to run with it. So what is going on, fellas? Appreciate y'all having me on tonight.
You are always worthy of that introduction. Stop. Yeah, that's what you are, as the most modest man on Twitter. That's what you are. And
I gotta be a change up, Jeff, to like, the extremes one way or the other. It's not to just be a nice little even keel there on Twitter,
Oh, gosh, I wish I had your patience and empathy sometimes. But anyway, we wanted to bring you in because obviously you cover FIU and FAU, and have been following the Owls this year as Willie Taggart approaches a transitional year in much the same way that UCF is approaching a transitional year. FAU is moving into the American next year. The Owls come into this game with UCF as underdogs, but they are 2-1 on the season, played in week 0. But so far, that the one thing that has been a constant for them this year, Eric, is scoring points. And they dropped 40. Now, granted, competition, right? But they dropped 43 on Charlotte. They scored 38 at Ohio and lost by 3, and then dropped 42 on Southeastern Louisiana. How is it looking right now for the Owls, at least on offense? Does Willie Taggart finally feel like he's got some solid footing underneath him?
Yeah, fellas. So when you talk about the Owls, you really got to start with the fact that it is as you mentioned, a transitional year for the program going to the American, very much a transitional year for the offense. They bring in former Middle Tennessee State offensive coordinator Brent Dearman. And for, listeners who may not be familiar with the Owls or Brent Dearman's time in Middle Tennessee, he is a guy who runs a very up-tempo, you'd almost say in any offense in college football nowadays, it's got those air raid principles, you know what I mean? It's very similar. Again, I wouldn't call it by any stretch of imagination an air raid offense, but kind of a hybrid spread, hybrid air raid in terms of the principles, in terms of the passing game. So they're going to look to run plays, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly to those receivers and make plays. And that's really translated this year, guys, to the amount of points that they've scored. I think Nkosi Perry, Willie Taggart spoke about it from even media days, Conference USA media days, as to how much more comfortable he feels with this program. They came in year 1 from Miami and, wasn't there in time for spring, just was a guy who was going to be there in time for fall and just wanted to find his place amongst his teammates and not rock the boat. This year, Willie Taggart said that, Nkosi's been much more vocal, much more about, hey, I need this route run this way, or I need this from these receivers. And it's really showed, guys. I mean, even though last week he threw 2 interceptions, was his first 2 interceptions of the year against Southeastern Louisiana, and he's looked just so much more poised and in control of this offense. I mean, I had a chance to cover 3 FAU games last year, and at times looked a little tentative, but this year he just looks to be the man in command. And then, I'll transition to some of the weapons around him on offense. You got to start with kind of a surprise at running back, fellas. A former USF transfer, USF Bull, Johnny Ford, was the guy last year for FAU, had over 1,000 all-purpose yards, but he hasn't been seen this year. A name for Knights fans to keep an eye on is Larry McCammon from Hoover High. Anyone who watched the old MTV documentary 2-A-Days, that's the high school days from there in Alabama. Guys, he looks like a legit running back. He was a 3-star prospect coming out, but got banged up his first 2 years. This year, a lot of quickness, and definitely something, for UCF fans to pay attention to coming off of the rushing performance of last week against Louisville. And then some of the guys, as far as the receivers, Jaquan Burton and Jamal Edrin, 2 taller receivers, LeJante Wester, kind of a shifty slot guy, and Tony Johnson. So all in all, that FAU offense has definitely been moving and trending in the right direction. It's just a matter of, outside of that 2.5 quarters they had at Ohio, in which seemingly it's one of those things I'm still trying to make sense of. I don't know what happened where they went up 16-0 and just kind of took their foot off the gas pedal and let Ohio, get back in the game and momentum being on the road. Outside of those 2.5 quarters, guys, they've been phenomenal.
Of course, you mentioned Perry, the quarterback, used to be at Miami. How has he looked in this offense? And then another familiar name, the defensive coordinator, Todd Orlando, who's made the rounds in the sport, including obviously former defensive coordinator at Houston under Tom Herman and company, of course, was at USC. They've struggled a little bit with the pass defense, but I'm curious, Perry, how he's fitting in, and then Todd Orlando in the defense.
Yeah, so just kind of piggyback on what I said, Eric, about Nkosi Perry. I mean, again, he just looks so much more comfortable in the offense. And people tend to forget because of the way his Miami tenure went, or his Miami career went. This kid was a 4-star recruit coming out of Ocala. I mean, 6'4", $185, still doesn't look any more stout in terms of his frame, but he's got the arm talent. He's got all of the physical tools, and you can definitely see his playmaking ability, as I mentioned, with those receivers, specifically Jamal Edrin and Jaquan Burton. Say that 3 times fast. But those are 2 taller receivers who tend to make plays on the outside. Tony Johnson as well, 6'3", $190. He's a bigger target on the outside. And then LeJante Wester. Wester led the team in receptions and receiving yards last year, but is working out of the slot this year. So it's been a bit of an adjustment. But yeah, I mean, that offense looks night and day. And even the offensive line. They've got a Middle Tennessee transfer, Dorian Hinton, who came down with Brent Dearman, has been at the guard spot, looks pretty good there, so guys like Evan Neal and others. So that whole offense is kind of rounded to form and performed well. And then quickly on the defense, and, we can kind of flesh this out as far as you want, but FAU's defense, very quietly in Conference USA over the past 2 years, has been one of the better groups, kind of a sum of all parts defense. I will point out that if Ferns, and I'll get to the secondary in a second, Eric, but arguably one of the best defensive linemen in Conference USA, and Evan Anderson, an Orlando guy from Jones High School, 6'4", 340, a mountain of a defensive tackle. He's not going to play. That should play in the Knights' favor because he's one of the top nose guards in Conference USA. But when you get into that secondary, a guy like TJ Young, quietly one of the top defensive backs in all group of 5 football, he's been dealing with a neck injury, but when he's healthy, he is right. A matchup that I'm really intrigued to see how it'll play out, Eric, is Romaine Smoke Mungeon. He's about 5'9", $175, Tampa guy out of Plant High School. Plays much bigger than his size. He's one of those old school cornerbacks that, even though he's on the smaller side, definitely rises to the occasion. I want to see, just in terms of an athletic matchup, I think him versus Javon Baker. That should be an interesting matchup. Obviously, Javon, about 6'1", 205, 210, has a size advantage, but definitely should be something to keep an eye on in the secondary. And also, again, if TJ Young does play, he's one of the top defensive backs in all group of 5 football. So that defense has definitely come along together, come along as the season's progressed under Todd Orlando, and a kind of a sum of all parts defense.
Let me ask you about this FAU team in terms of, in relation to UCF, and you've touched upon some of those things, but I want to get your real take on this.
Sure.
You've watched UCF first 2 games as a beloved alma mater, as your beloved alma mater, and you followed FAU to this point. What are the spots that you feel FAU is vulnerable to UCF, and what are the spots that you feel UCF could be vulnerable to FAU?
I think FAU is vulnerable to UCF, like I mentioned, with Evan Anderson being out. That is a huge loss. I think a guy like Isaiah Bowser, a big running back, because for all of the comparisons you can make of the Knights and the Owls, as far as both being G5 teams, UCF, in terms of just sheer size on both lines. We know how long we've seen Sam Jackson play at UCF for what feels like a decade now, right? Across the UCF offensive line, they have bigger and better size than a FAU defensive line. That's really going to depend on, a kind of like a quickness and slippery guys like Jalen Joyner and others on the outside. So I expect, Isaiah Bowser, and even to an extent, John Rice Plumlee, to be able to, take advantage of the rushing lanes there. Now, to flip it on the other side in terms of FAU, again, I really like, not that UCF secondary necessarily a struggle per se. We saw they came off of a solid outing, even though Malik Cunningham isn't, in my opinion, Malik Cunningham, while a great dual threat, isn't quite the passer that N'Kosi Perry is. We saw what the secondary did last week against Louisville, a pretty solid job, but don't sleep on FAU's receivers. Again, they just are a young and growing bunch, really athletic. And I'm probably saying the same for the 3rd time. LeJante Wester, a guy who can work in the slot. He's that guy who, in today's college football is going to run those mesh routes, going to run those quick ins, things of that nature that get you 5, 6, 7 yards. So those will be 2 matchups that I'm really, really intriguing to look at. And I'll give you a few players in terms of, for FAU, linebacker Eddie Williams. He's a junior linebacker, a guy out of Miami who's waited his turn to start, and he's really been tearing it up over the first 3 games. Has a little over, I believe he has 26 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. He's going to be a big factor only because Evan Anderson isn't there. So if they're going to have any chance of stopping the Knights inside, it's going to be that Mike linebacker. And again, for UCF, Definitely really intrigued to see that Javon Baker matchup versus Smoke Munchin, because with his size advantage, he should be able to make some plays.
I want to ask you about FAU here in the big picture. So last year for them in CUSA before they go to the American, there's a White as an AD there, Brian White, of course, the brother of Danny White. And we have an FAU alum who's also a UCF alum in our staff. And I talked to him, and he's like, hey, Willie better get him to a bowl game this year. I'm curious, what was your expectations for FAU going into this season, considering, the competition will get a little tougher going to the American? Of course, they'll have some friends with him joining them in the American, which is a whole other storyline. But what's the expectations around Willie Taggart and the Owls this year? And does Willie need to produce to have a bowl team this year?
Quick question, Elo. Was that Noah Goldberg? The alum?
That is correct.
It is Noah.
Right, yeah,
yes. He's the only one that could say he's a graduate of both.
And you'll see him on Saturday. You'll be there shooting photos.
Noah's a good guy. Shout out to Noah. Love his work and love what he does. But no, to your question, I mean, I think you got to start. It was no secret, Eric, that at the end of last year, it was a little dicey for a few, period of time as to whether Willie Taggart would return, because they weren't happy with the way things ended. 4 straight losses to end the year. You start the year, where they were, 5-2, 5-3, and then this collapse down the stretch against teams, quite frankly, that they were definitely more talented than. So it definitely, in terms of spinning it to this year, and when we spoke with Willie Taggart at Conference USA Media Days in Dallas, it was funny because he was always, FAU was the first team up. They did it kind of in sequence, and you'd bring each team in. And there was this air of like uncertainty when he came in the room, about how tense is Willie Taggart going to be. And he came in all smiles, all happy, and it made it easier on us media guys. So it's like, all right, seemingly he's in a good mood. He's not like super tense about entering this year. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that there is an expectation for this program, right or wrong, that coming off of the Lane Kiffin era, 2 conference titles in 3 years. The reason why the Ohio loss was so disappointing for people in Boca, because it felt, and you can make this case even for UCF, a loss against Louisville, you feel like you're past that point, right? And that that game is a game that you should win. For FAU fans, they felt we're past being, a 3-point game with a mediocre MAC team. Now, to play devil's advocate, the cupboard was bare or I shouldn't say bare. Let me retract that. It was not necessarily the team that Lane Kiffin had when they were winning conference titles and Willie Taggart took over. So I think with the coaching additions, bring in Chad Lunsford from Georgia Southern, bring in Todd Orlando, bring in Brent Dearman. This is the year that you can truly say you've had a few years of your recruiting. You got your second year of your transfer quarterback, your quarterback out of the portal. This is the year that you have to produce. So again, the loss to Ohio was disappointing, but they did beat Charlotte week 1, and they can still accomplish their goals in Conference USA. But I think, in my opinion, they're going to need at least 7 wins for Willie Taggart to feel super comfortable about entering.
Got to get him to a bowl game.
A bowl game. And Elo, I don't think 6-6 does it. I think they need to be
winning record.
You need to be 7. Yeah, I don't think 6-6 or 6-7 does it. I think you need to be 7 and above.
Interesting. Well, I will say this. All right, just to start this up, if it goes south for Willie, there's a coach out there that Brian White's brother hired at UCF that's now available, who's had success in the state of Florida. Just throw that out there. Little Frost White reunion, Boca.
Well, listen, it might not be. If we get to that point, it might not be bad.
Frost White American. I think that could be that. Yeah, it's an interesting point because Willie. It's so fascinating. He did a great job at South Florida. When he had it there. And then obviously it was a fiasco at Florida State. And I'm kind of been fascinated to see how it would work at FAU. The pieces
not that great at Oregon either.
Well, yeah, he was barely there 5 minutes. Yeah. But it is interesting, Eric, because, look, this is a critical time in college athletics. And you and I have talked about it. I mean, I remember last time you were on, we kind of butted heads about FIU in the future. And you did incredible work last year covering the whole Butch Davis fiasco and how that ended. And you were one of the few that was able to kind of be there and be able to get Butch to talk to someone, number one. So I'm kind of curious, where do you see right now FAU as they go to the American and FIU in general, and kind of what does it mean for both schools moving forward? Because, over here we're obviously focused on UCF and the impact to the Big 12, but there's a rippling effect that's going on across college athletics, and you got two schools in your backyard involved in this.
Yeah. So first off, Eric, when we came on, we did butt heads, and you came out on the right side of things there in terms of that. So I got to give you your credit there. It's funny. A wise man once said to me off the record, at least I think it was off the record. If it wasn't, he can out himself, that FIU is about 2 decades behind UCF. I'll let that wise man identify himself if he so chooses to.
He's right here. He's right here. I was dead wrong. I had the wrong South Florida school.
Yeah, I mean FAU's invested. That FIU hasn't, and I think you had the report about how little FIU is invested in their football program. In FAU, I've spoken to their softball coach who they just hired. They've talked about all the facilities that Brian White and the vision he's had, things like that. So that's why it's 2 programs in totally universities in different directions, and we're seeing the impacts here with the realignment.
Yeah. So to quickly, kind of jump in here in terms of, I'll take it from the FIU perspective first. They truly are starting from scratch. As a name that Knights fans are familiar with, Scott Carr is the athletic director. Mm-hmm. It is night and day, no pun intended, in terms of the way that they are doing things at FIU now. Now, listen, I can't even begin to say, when I say start from the floor, things like getting a booster club. They just instituted their Panther Club, which, you have hierarchies, you can donate and get access to so on and so forth. They didn't have that before. So they truly are starting from scratch. It's funny. One of the things we asked Scott during his introductory press conference was how long his contract was. The reason we asked him that was, he was like, hey, 5 years, is that long enough? And he said, and I think it was fitting. He said, I think it's enough to buy me another 5 years. So that goes to show kind of where the thinking is at FIU. So it is very much a long game. In terms of conference realignment, that's out the window. I mean, for FIU, I guess you could make the argument that there will be one more round before it's all said and done. I just don't think they'll be up to speed in terms of, really having the infrastructure. Because we all know this, guys. It's not just wins and losses that's going to get you in a new conference. It's going to be, on-field production, facilities. I mean, there's a reason why North Texas and Rice were chosen. You know what I mean? Is some of that what was just facilities and the infrastructure there. So it is going to take some time. Mike McIntyre is someone who wasn't necessarily the most popular choice at first, but he is someone who has done it in previous stops. And I do think, for example, Tim Harris, the Knights running backs coach, was someone who, I don't think Tim will mind anyone saying this. He wanted that job. He was a former FIU assistant, a Miami guy. But, and I would say this to Tim's face, so I have no issue saying it here, where I do think it would have been a tough ask is the FIU job, and it'll be a perfect segue to the FAU job. The FIU job isn't just coaching, guys. It's coaching and building their whole atmosphere from the ground up, going there and Mike McIntyre going from Miami, Northwestern to recruit a kid all the way to Doral to go talk to someone who could be a potential booster. So someone who has taken this job, you probably need to have the experience of building it from the ground up before. And I do think in Tim's case, it might have been a tough ask to be both a recruiter, a coach, and a salesman. Yeah. So there's that. Whereas at FAU, whether that's Willie Taggart's job or someone else's, FAU Stadium is one of the best amongst that group of 5 ranks. They just built the Smith Athletic Facility, which is a phenomenal training facility. If you guys haven't seen it, it's right next to FAU Stadium. It's really well done. Their basketball facilities and whatnot, that's Brian White's job, but just in terms of the football coach, everything is there in place for them. So I think they're in a nice place heading into the American with Rice, North Texas, Charlotte. Those are programs that, in my mind, I mean, if you put FAU and USF on paper, FAU is right there. I mean, sure, USF's getting their indoor facility, but they're right there.
That a boy. See, Eric's are the smart people, my friend. I've told Jeffrey this on the show. If you told me I would buy stock, FAU or South Florida moving forward, I'd take FAU. I really would.
I really, in my defense, when I said that about Florida International, Butch was coming in, and I really thought that was the right spot for him. And as Eric Lopez, you said, to your credit, Eric Henry, it fell apart really quickly, and Butch was rather vocal about the fact that there was not the support there that he required and that he expected. But like you said, Scott Carr coming in, Scott, we've said it before on this program, Scott's got a heavy lift down there, but if there is anyone who can do it, Scott Carr can do it. Because we've seen what he was able to do behind the scenes at UCF for the years that he was here. It's a heavy lift, but he certainly has the right attitude. I want to go back to FAU for a second. And I say this as somebody who, grew up in Broward County, not far away. FAU, for the longest period of time, we considered it a 4-year community college. And when I was a student at UCF and it came out that FAU was starting football and Howard Schnellenberger was going to found the program, the late Howard Schnellenberger was starting the program, we thought, oh my God, FAU is going to play football? Like, is that like really? And Division I? Like, it was, it blew our minds. And they just slowly but surely kept the line going up and to the right. And you're absolutely right about the facilities, the investment that they have made in building that program, not just from the football perspective, but from other sports as well, to their immense credit. And they've been, I think, rightfully rewarded with a spot in the American, which I think is a good place for that program. The one thing that I'm curious about with FAU is the culture around athletics, because it's one thing to produce a program that has all the bells and whistles, but it's another thing to develop a culture among the students, the alumni, the fans. How is that looking from FAU's perspective? Because there's still this perception out there that it's still a 4-year commuter school, but has the culture changed in a way similar to maybe it had changed for UCF when UCF built the on-campus stadium in 2007?
Yeah, Jeff. So I do want to give this disclaimer, right? Part of this perspective is somewhat of an outside perspective. Someone who covers Conference USA. I've been to FAU multiple times, covered multiple games there, but I can't claim to be on the ground in Boca per se. But this is what I can say that I think is unique. It feels like it's a bit of two-pronged and they can't get both prongs on the same level. This is what I mean. When Lane Kiffin was there and they were producing Conference USA championships, you felt the buy-in from the greater Boca community and those people, right? The people who are going to fund the program. They felt like, hey, Lane knows what he's doing. He's a name to recognize. They're
all
winning.
Aboard the Lane train. Remember
all
that?
Aboard the Lane train. But the students didn't necessarily board the Lane train as much, right? Now, what's been interesting is in the first few games of this year, Jeff, students have shown out, and I'll be very intrigued to see how the students show out, on Saturday, because you're facing a team that in state. You got friends that will go to UCF. You got plenty of people. I expect to see a good student turnout. But the people who fund the program have not necessarily had that buy-in on Willie Taggart, right? So
that seems surprising to me. I mean, because like Eric was saying, it's not like Willie Taggart can't coach.
No, but the way they finished last season probably soured some people. Am I right, Eric? I mean, that finish really probably soured a lot of people. I mean, I talked to Noah, like you mentioned earlier. I mean, there are some people they're disgruntled, maybe with that bad taste from last year.
Eric, last year especially. Last year was probably the height of it. But even that COVID year, I think there were people who were willing to say, okay, it's a COVID year. They'd still qualified for a bowl game. They didn't play, 10 games. I want to say they had something like, a 5-4 record, if memory serves me correct. Because of course, you didn't need 6 wins to get to a bowl. But yeah, it has not necessarily been a fantastic love affair from, really the middle of Willie Taggart's first year all the way on. So back to your question, Jeff, that's what I think is unique. I think for Willie Taggart, they are playing a brand of football right now that at least is putting points on the scoreboard, similarly to how things were, during the Lane Kiffin era. And I think that will help maybe get the buy-in of some of those, people, those older, that Boca fan base who fund the program. But the students are on board. And to me, just to bring it all the way around, it's weird, guys. I don't want to go on too much of a diatribe, but I've given up trying to understand. And Jeff, I'll defer to you as a South Florida native or someone who grew up in South Florida. And you too, Eric. I've given up trying to understand. I get it. There are things you can do in South Florida. FIU, I have given up trying to understand. I mean, anyone who knows where FIU's campus is knows you're not quite on South Beach, right? So, I mean, I would think on a Thursday, Friday night, you can go to a football game or a Saturday night, but I've given up. The same thing kind of applies with FAU in that, you know, now the students have come around, as I mentioned this year, but in previous years, I was like, I don't know what else there is to do in Boca from what I've seen. And, you know, I graduated UCF in 2014.
Retirement homes are pretty nice.
Right. Like I graduated college in 2014. I'm not that far removed from college. I don't remember there much being to do in Boca. Why are they not showing up? So kudos and give them credit for so far this year being, you know, showing up. But it's always kind of been befuddling to me unless the only thing I have to go with this, guys, and I will send it back to you on this, is from Palm Beach County down, from Jupiter down, it's just trendy to be a Miami fan.
Bingo. Ding, ding, ding.
If you're going to invest in a college football game, you're going to go to Hard Rock Stadium, seemingly.
No, well, I've said before, like, you know, Miami is in terms of the Miami Hurricanes are not a college team. They're a second professional team in Miami. That to me is what they are. They have a more geographical grab on that on South Florida. They just do. It's not a college atmosphere at all. You know, it just isn't. So, go ahead, Lopez.
Well, and it fits on a pro. It's a pro town. That's the thing. Like, you know, when we discussed the FIU a few years ago, Eric, that was, and remember, again, full disclosure, I had lots of family members that went to FIU, so I have investments in FIU, but I also know that town. That's a pro town. That's a Dolphins, Heat town. And then Miami Hurricanes, who, by the way, now their head coach is the former FIU head coach, the greatest FIU head coach, Mario Cristobal. So that's the issue that FIU has always had. That's why I was always skeptical on FIU when we got back and forth. The FAU one's more interesting because they're a little further on the Boca side. And I'll be curious to see what happens when they go to the American, if they can gain some fans that go to the American. But, you know, the interesting thing about Broward, you're right, that's still a Dolphin, Canes area. The Florida Panthers actually had a great success in hockey over there. It's a pro town. And I think FAU and South Florida, I've joked about it, but I am serious. I think that could be a good rivalry because I think both schools have the same problem. In South Florida and Tampa, that's a Bucks town, a Lightning town, Gators, Seminoles. FAU has the similar issues, and I guess winning big is the key, and it sounds like Willie Taggart, that's probably why some are soured on Willie, especially following Lane Kiffin, who had great success.
Guys, really quick, not to, you know, completely sidetrack the conversation, but, you know, it's funny. I'm going to kind of bring all of our topics together here. We've talked about conference realignment and these programs. I covered FIU at Texas State last weekend. Sunbelt Conference Commissioner Keith Gill was in attendance. And I said they had a great weekend, right? App State wins over I'm forgetting who they beat. Marshall beat Notre Dame.
App State beat Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. Georgia Southern beats Nebraska. But one of the things that I think is super interesting, and of course you can't go back and do it now, you know, with the American, but one of the things that's super interesting about the Sun Belt's realignment, guys, is if you look at all of their schools or the bulk of their schools, it's like a 3-4 hour drive for all of those, for the majority of those programs. So in talking about building up those natural rivalries, you can hop in your car and be like, yo, I'm going to go to, you know, App State versus Coastal or whatnot, right? And I think that's what's interesting in terms of bringing it back to FAU. And maybe you can get that with USF where you build in a natural rivalry, you know, from Boca to Tampa is about 3 and change. But the American doesn't have that benefit, right, of just true regionality. So I think that plays a factor as well in terms of, you know, truly building that fan and atmosphere and fan environment. So it's just a thought. It's one that I think.
No, it's fair. I mean, the American's gone with Mike Oresco's gone with the approach of big markets for the most part.
Yeah.
Whereas the Sun Belt's
big markets and big and schools that pump out a lot of graduates too. That's the other thing.
Yes.
You know, and I think, and because we talked about this, I think it was Eric Lopez. I think we talked about this before. Is that kind of business model, which I think is pretty interesting. You know, Oresco is going for, like you said, major metro area schools that have a
TV markets. Yeah.
Yeah. And also they're kind of like the number 2 school in that market, but they pump out a lot of graduates, a lot of public schools, right? And UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, they're good examples of that. And they're all moving on. And I think one of the other things that's interesting too about the American, he's placing a bet on that business model. The other thing that I think is interesting, Eric Henry, and I wanted to get your take on this too, is that when we saw this round of conference realignment, you notice how I think that the tell on all of this, and maybe the tell going forward in the upper levels of FBS, is schools that are properties with certain networks. The Sun Belt had a big television, a really good television contract, I think, with ESPN. The Americans' television contract with ESPN has done, I think, has paid dividends for all of its schools, UCF included, even though probably UCF is worth more than what the average was for the conference. That's still, they went from $0 to $7.5 million a year in the span of less than a decade. That's serious. That's a big jump when you really think about it. Conference USA does not have a deal with ESPN. And so what did we see? Where did the American pull its newest membership from? Conference USA.
Well, Eric, let me ask you. You were at USA Media Day. What's the talk around the league? What's the future for the league?
We asked, guys, I'm not the Judy McLeod basher. I think when you look at, and we all know this as UCF grads and people who saw what that round of realignment 2012 to 2013 ended up being, there wasn't much that Judy McLeod could have done in terms of the approach she took, right? Which was going for those big markets. And listen, she's been bashed left, right, and center for the way things have turned out. The reason I giggled and hesitated is this. I say all that to give you the background. When we approached Judy McLeod, or we were given access to her at media days, the first words out of her mouth were, "All right, guys, I want this to be a back and forth, not a shouting match." That just goes to show you where she was in terms of her level of I'm over this in terms of, being on the defense. To specificity to the TV deal and what the talk was, it was a question she got. And she said, look, she kind of, said, hey, I don't have anything to report right now. When we have something further to report, we'll give you something. But there definitely is a feeling. And I asked her specifically about the regionality. I said, hey, it feels to me as if this conference has now gotten even further spread out, because you go to New Mexico State and then to Liberty, right? And her retort, which I failed geography class here, is that in theory, if you get rid of if you lose FAU and you lose Charlotte, right, but you get a Jacksonville State and a Sam Houston State, in theory, you got more of a cluster in that area. In my mind, it's a bit of a technicality on the answer, because your furthest schools are still New Mexico State and Liberty and FIU. And yeah, I can only imagine what it's like to try to get, hey, FIU fans, you want to go to Lynchburg, Virginia? I've been to Lynchburg, Virginia. I couldn't get an Uber out, fellas. I had a 7 a.m. flight, and I thought I was going to be walking to the airport. That's not a joke. The one person who drives Uber on a Sunday morning picked me up and took me to the airport. So,
shout out to the one Uber driver who works on a Sunday morning in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Exactly. So you get my point. But yeah, Eric, I felt that the Eric and Jeff, I felt that the talk around the conference media days was really just kind of a wait and see approach. We've taken Jacksonville State. They've had some success against FBS programs. Sam Houston State, at least they've committed to football. They are building. New Mexico State is what it is. Sorry to any, Aggies fans who may catch this. They've been a bad program under Doug Martin and now Jerry Kill for a long time. And then Liberty. So, and we know the direction that that program is in, but it comes with everything else. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, I've in our chat, I've been I have not held back in terms of my opinions on Liberty, and I will leave it at that. But the one thing with New Mexico State, they're not far from UTEP.
Right. Correct.
But El Paso, baby.
I mean,
Battle of I-10.
Hey, listen, that's some beautiful land out there. I'm not going to lie. It's actually.
I've been there for a week, and that's the last time I'll be there. Let's just leave it at that.
That's more than enough.
Let's get back to the present here Saturday. I'm very curious about. I know the game is pretty much going to be a sellout.
what do you think the ratio in the fan base will be Saturday night as far as UCF fans and FAU fans?
70-30. I think this is going to be a big UCF takeover. It's a heavy opportunity for the South Florida UCF fan base to get to this game. I know just from, Twitter and a couple group chats here, there are plenty of UCF fans who are, in that area who plan on going. And of course, going to have people going to make the trip. That's not to say that I don't think that FAU fans will show out, but I think if they were going into this game at 3-0, I think there'd be a little more excitement. I think they're a little bit, kind of skittish, for lack of a better phrase, because of that Ohio loss. Maybe like, all right, I don't want to see us taking on the chin. But with that being said, I do know, having been around, at South Florida this past week, that some people are a little more excited given UCF's loss to Louisville. But yeah, I'm thinking 70-30, maybe 65-35.
Ouch. Sounds to me like you're telling me some FAU fans might be making some profit selling tickets to UCF fans.
I do believe that, in fact, yes.
Wow. I always this is my UCF fan PTSD coming in, Eric, because there's something about this that's Willie Taggart, last time he played UCF, he won. That was back in 2016. I get it, but still. And if FAU is for real, this feels like this could be their real prove-it game. And I think this is, and I told Eric in the first segment of our show, this is a real gut check game for UCF. How do you come back after a disappointing one-score loss at home to a team that you feel that you should have beaten, and then you're going down on the road in at least a semi-hostile environment against a team that's punching up at you. And what do you? And this will get us to the real question I want to get an answer from you, which is, how do you see this one playing out?
I just finished writing the preview for Underdog Dynasty, and quite frankly, I think this is one that if FAU is going to win this game, it's going to be a shootout. I think there was an idea of that they can grind it out. No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be on N'Kosi Perry's arm and those receivers. But with that being said, how do I see this game playing out in the end? Quite frankly, all the points you make there are valid. I just think there's too much at stake for UCF in terms of, and this isn't my, UCF alum bias coming in here. I just think for Gus Malzahn, as a coach, just taking an objective perspective here, he didn't take this job to be 1-2 losing to Louisville and FAU. I think given the amount of talent that he's brought on this roster, they should be able to win this game at the end of the day. And I do. I think I had a final score of 31-21 in my preview.
All right. All of us on the UCF side certainly hope you're right about that. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be on CBS Sports Network. Kickoff is at 7:30. What's the weather going to be like down there, by the way?
It's going to be another warm South Florida evening. Not any no rain. Are
we going to get some sea breeze at least coming off the coast?
Hopefully that would be nice. I would hope for one day not to be able to sweat out all of the hydration I have in my system by the time game day starts. So
no. You got to save it when you come back up and see your alma mater. That's
you nailed it exactly.
Eric Henry from Underdog Dynasty, UCF graduate, our good friend. Eric, update UCF, all the UCF fans listening on where they can find your work.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at @EricCHenry_. You can find my FIU and Conference USA coverage at Underdog Dynasty, which of course is SB Nation's home for Group of 5 football coverage outside of our lovely team sites, such as the one that Jeff and Eric run here. And last but not least, if you're ever interested, FIU, FAU at Shulable Pod. Check us out on Twitter.
All right. Eric Henry,
pod. Is that rivalry going to continue?
Nothing is official, but we asked both Scott Carr, Brian White, and Willie Taggart, and they said they would like to see it continue. So,
there you go.
I bet FAU would like to see that continue.
Yeah, they've had a lot of success.
I bet FIU would like to see that continue. It helps out their schedule, certainly. Eric Henry, thank you so much for joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will be following you on Saturday for the game, and safe travels wherever as you head down. I'm making that long drive across Alligator Alley, as you always do. I don't know how you do it, but you get it done, man. The hardest working man in show business. It's good seeing you, Eric.
Appreciate it, fellas. Thank you. Anytime.
All right, 3, 2, 1. So good to see Eric, man. I love that dude. I don't know how Libby, that one's for you.
He's the best, man. He's
that
awesome.
one's for you.
He's by the best. And seriously, he did an incredible job covering that whole Butch Davis story with FIU.
Oh, he nailed it. He was all over it more than anybody else. Yeah. More than anybody else. And like, he's just a daggum good reporter, man.
Absolutely.
All right, so Eric, final thoughts. UCF FAU. This is, like I said earlier, man. This is a real gut check game for UCF. I think Eric Henry's right. This kind of has the earmarks of Gus, looking at Isaiah Bowser, John Rice Plumlee, and saying, guys, enough is enough. Let's ram the ball down their throats and show them what a Big 12 team looks like.
And hopefully set up some passing because of that. Set it up with some big plays passing-wise, the pass defense. I'm kind of, hey, look, who am I? Eric's think alike. So I'm going to go with Henry on that one, and kind of a similar score, maybe an extra score for UCF, but that kind of ball game. Because I do think FAU could move the ball a little bit. Turnovers will play a factor, as we always know. That's a very, cliche thing, but it is true. So, yeah, I'll go with Henry around 31-21, 34-21 type of game.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like 38-21, somewhere around there. Yeah, but it's – I guess my question is, like, let's say that does happen, right? Does it really answer the questions that we had coming out of Louisville?
Some yes, probably some no, right? Like, that's kind of how it works, right? But, hey, it's a win, so you move forward and you try to build then towards Georgia Tech. And then, really, I think, to me, if I'm Gus and the staff, you want to know what you've got. Everything's got to be figured out by the end of this month when you start conference play with SMU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. All right. Thanks again to Eric Henry, Eric C. Henry _ on Twitter, where you can find him and all of his work and get some really good use. Again, he's the nicest guy on Twitter. I don't know how he does it. He has the patience of Job. Amazing. He is a Zen master. And we appreciate him and his time. And check out Underdog Dynasty. They always do great stuff, especially covering Group of 5 football and other teams around the American. You want to get other teams around the American that are not UCF or Cincinnati with Down the Drive. Make sure you hit up Underdog Dynasty. All right, stick around. When we come back, Elo and I are going to wrap up news from volleyball, soccer, and golf. And wrap up the podcast in just a little bit. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, and we're back after this. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff and Eric back with you here as we wrap things up here in segment 3. Looking at what's going on around the world of UCF sports. And Eric, I want to start with volleyball, who had a fantastic weekend this weekend. They are now 5-0. They won all 3 matches at the UCF Invitational. Beat UNC Wilmington on Friday, and then that set up Saturday against Miami in a match that, Miami is pretty good. They're expected to contend for the ACC this year, even though they suffered a loss the previous night against Illinois Chicago. They brought it in this match, but UCF came back from down 2-1 to win it in 5 once again. So they've beaten Kansas State in 5 and Miami in 5. McKenna Melville, another 19 kills to go with 14 digs. Kari Zumak had 19 kills, so that's huge. She was tremendous in this match too, Eric. And UCF, performed, I thought, so well in the 3 sets that they did win, hitting 438, 371, and then 333 in the 5th. 333 in the 5th against the team that hit 292 and only had 1 error in the 5th, but the Knights got the job done in that 5th set, and what was a really spectacular atmosphere too.
Second largest crowd for a regular season volleyball match at the venue, only trailing the volleyball against Stanford in Todd Dagenet's first year.
Yeah.
Incredible crowd, incredible atmosphere. You and I have discussed about rivalries and who's going to be the rival and the whole USF thing. I'm going to tell you right now, Miami is UCF is your volleyball rival. That was intense. They always go 5 sets. Both are well coached. I even asked Todd Dagenet about it, which you can check out the whole post-game pressers on our YouTube channel on Black and Gold Banneret, and he alluded to it. He loves playing Miami. He thinks it's a good matchup for the RPI and resume, and obviously being in the state, and he intends on playing them every year. I think this is your rival because they're similar programs. They're evenly matched. They both had great setters with Vach for Miami and, of course, Amber Olsen for UCF. But the difference was Kari Zumock, 19 kills. That could be your second weapon offensively to help Melville, and Abby Hansen. Jeff, you were there with me there. Fourth and fifth set, they were calling Zumock and Abby Hansen. They were leading the offense, not McKenna. And how long have we talked about not being all dependent on McKenna, needing some balance around the offense? That was, to me, the big takeaway from there is here you're playing a quality Miami team that's going to be an NCAA tournament team, and you had a balanced offense to beat them with Zumock and Hansen offensively. They've got more variety on this offense than they probably have ever had in the Dagenet era.
Yeah, and also Emily Wilson too, who came in the middle of that match and I think was really solid on that on the side. I think one of the things too that I've observed from this team and is that it's not the same formula as it has been. And I think one of the good things about that is you're seeing a squad that Amber Olsen is really not afraid to, she's setting the middles a lot more, I think, than she has in the past. And I think the reason why is because she knows that, there is some real offensive power there. We don't just have defensive middles anymore. I think that, like you said, Abby Hansen is a real strong attacker up front.
Hansen had 9 blocks, total blocks in that match too. Something that Dagenet called, it was funny. Todd said in the postgame, people out of Oregon, the word out of Oregon is that she wasn't a great blocker, and he's like, baloney. But that's significant because one of the big questions going into the year is how do you offset losing Narissa Moravec, who is one of the nation's best blockers, and Anne-Marie Watson, who has records in blocks? The answer might be Abby Hansen, among others. Yeah,
I mean, in that case, Abby Hansen in that way, kills 2 birds with 1 stone, too, in a way. And I thought that was that in particular, I think, is what Todd's been looking for, and it's the same thing with Kari. Kari has been fantastic on that right side, and the other thing that was encouraging was that Amber Olsen looked like she was okay. After that scare with the ankle last week, and I think the other thing that was really good was really emotional win, right? Then they come back the next day and they just dispatch UIC. And so now they come to the Jayhawk Classic Tournament, which is their only road tournament of the season. Remember, UCF got that late start. Most teams play 4 non-conference weekends. UCF's only playing 3. But they're playing Omaha on Thursday, Kansas at home on Friday.
Ranked 23rd in the country. That's your the one to circle there.
Another Big 12 team in Lipscomb on Saturday. So you already beat one Big 12 team in Kansas State last week. Now you're going to get a road test against Kansas. I love the fact that they held serve at home. Now you're going to see that road test again, and I don't think we should. I don't think we should overlook either Omaha nor Lipscomb in this case either, because Lipscomb's actually going to be pretty good this year. Omaha has actually been pretty good historically. So, yeah, this is your big road test before you start conference play next weekend on the road against Memphis and SMU. So, but I think everyone has that Kansas match circled for fairly obvious reasons.
Well, and Todd said afterwards, what he's curious about is, does this team travel? Right?
Yeah.
Like you played at home. Now you travel. Does your play travel? We're going to find out.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to move it over to soccer. Men's soccer, after you got a 3-2 victory over UC Irvine on Friday after beating UC Riverside the previous Monday. So now they have 8 days off until they start conference play already. So their non-conference schedule is over, and they head into non-conference at 3-1. With a no contest that they were leading 1-0 at FGCU. So they play Temple on Saturday. But talking about that, the game against Irvine, where they jumped out 1-0 on Luca Dorado. He then scored another one just prior to halftime to make it 2-1. Irvine tied it up, and then Mile Hayes, who has emerged, Eric, got UCF the game winner with 14 minutes to go. And despite being outshot, Eric, 19-11, when was the last time that ever happened for UCF men's soccer? They get the victory all the way out at Anteater. I love the Anteater Stadium in Irvine, California, in that long trip out. And they're not playing us. They didn't play a second match out in California. They went out there, played Irvine, came back, and got the job done. That's a big win.
Yeah, it was kind of tricky because that was going on during the football game, so it was hard to kind of follow, but it was back and forth. Good, you get a road win right before conference starts. Good to see Luca Dorado healthy. Remember, he didn't start the year healthy. Had an injury prior to the start of the season, so he looks like he's back to being 100% healthy, and that's big.
He looked healthy, all right, because he got the one goal in the Gulf Coast game that got wiped.
Yeah,
and got 2 in this one.
Yeah, still concerned about some of the defensively, they gave up some breaks there, but I think they're coming together a little bit, and just in time. You're going to get started here in conference, which is really where you're going to make your resume, if you will, now moving forward. Obviously, Tulsa's the favorites. They're ranked. They're once again a national title contender. But, you start out with Temple. You got to get off to a good start. That's the key. You want to get off to a good start. You want to see consistency. That was the big thing. Remember, we had Scott on before the season. He talked about the thing he was disappointed about last year. They weren't consistent, especially on the back line. So far, it looks like they could be more consistent this year, and they clearly have a goalie.
Yeah, I think that I would like to see a little bit better on the back line now. I mean, that's you're giving up 2 goals. You have to score 3. That does concern me somewhat because of the fact that you're relying too much on your goalkeeper in that case, and I think
100% agree. 100% agree.
I think that that's something that they got to iron out as they move forward. Women's soccer coming off the undefeated start or unbeaten start, had the game against North Florida wiped, and then of course the 2-1 loss at home to Ole Miss in dramatic fashion. They go up to North Carolina, to Chapel Hill, and fall 2-1 there on Sunday. And now they start conference play with an old foe on Thursday at 8:00 at the Memphis Tigers. Going back to that North Carolina match, Eric, they had a 1-0 lead. Ellie Moreno got the first goal of the game, but which is what you want to see, right? Get off to a good start, but then North Carolina turned into North Carolina, outshot UCF by more than a 2-1 margin, 15-7. And UCF couldn't hang on to the lead. They gave up 2 goals within 15 minutes to Allie Sentner and then Avery Patterson. Avery Patterson's got 6 goals on the season for North Carolina, but kind of a disappointing way to finish up. Well, they're not finished with non-conference play, I should say. They have one more non-conference match against Texas this coming Sunday as well in Austin. Okay.
Oh, man.
So how about this back-to-back? At Memphis, at Texas, Thursday, Sunday. Yikes, right?
Right, after playing Carolina and then Ole Miss before that, yeah.
Geez, we talked about this. This part of the schedule is the grind, man. Ole Miss, North Carolina, Memphis, Texas, before you come back home for Cincinnati on September 29th. Good thing they have 11 days off after the Texas game to prepare for Cincinnati at home. But what did we learn from the North Carolina game?
We need Kristen Scott back as soon as possible. She didn't play in the match. She's kind of really good. Could have made it. I definitely think she could have made a difference in the Ole Miss match. Carolina's really good. I mean, that's a big ask. They had some chances to get a result out of Chapel Hill, just didn't work out. But the big question now is do you get Kristen Scott back? She didn't make the trip to Chapel Hill. We know that because we saw her. And the question is, does she make the trip to Memphis? Does she make the trip to this Memphis match is big. These two teams always compete or in the mix for the conference title. It looks like Memphis, UCF, SMU probably are your front runners for the league. USF's kind of in a down year, but they're still USF. But this is a big match. It's a big swing match on the road. Could be the last time these two programs play each other. If you think about it, this could be it. They've been playing since CUSA days in 2006, and think of all the many conference championship matches they've had at stake. So, can they get Kristen Scott back? Because they got to get some results. This is a monster match to get a result because you got it. You didn't get the Ole Miss win, you didn't get Carolina. You got to build a resume, and this weekend could be your, with Memphis and Texas, especially in conference. You got to get your results in conference. This team is motivated by that. We'll see how they look against Memphis. Memphis is always dangerous. They have talented outside hitters that could score. They're going to try to pressure UCF defensively, so it'll be a test for the Knights defensively.
Yeah, 2-2-2 is where they are. Deuce is Wild right now, but have lost their last 2. So Can they recover for this first American Athletic Conference when that way they're not, playing from behind? I think that was one of the things, that was one of the main issues the last couple of years, is they dug themselves a hole in conference play. And so now they're trying to, and then they had to try and dig themselves out of it, and it was always hard to do. So because they had no margin for error later on in the season when, you get tired and things start, and things start getting a little wonky. So, again, this is a tough grind that they have, but if they can come out, I think if they come out of Memphis with a dub, score a dub against Memphis, get yourself a draw against Texas, I think you're feeling pretty good at 3-2, and you'd be 3-2-3 coming back home for Cincinnati. I think you're feeling pretty good.
That would be a good goal. That would be the goal. That would be the goal there. That would turn your season back on track to that tournament. If you don't get that result you mentioned, now you're playing catch up the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's going to be rough. All right. One last little bit that we wanted to get in before we go. UCF women's golf up at Charleston, South Carolina. The College of Charleston hosting the Cougar Classic. And the recap for UCF here, how about Pat Pidden, -7, tied for fourth individually, as UCF finished the third round under par. They ended the tournament in 8th at 2 over par, but at 54 holes, this is the record that Bryson Turner passed along to me. 854 over 54 holes is tied for the 4th best in program history. Still, it was only good enough for 8th place. Ole Miss was the winner at 839. But UCF women's golf is off and running, and I think we saw Pat Pidden out there. It looks like she's going to be the star.
Yeah, breakout year ahead in women's golf. Yeah. This will be another strong year.
She's going to be a serious national contender, even if UCF. I do expect that even if UCF does, as a team, does not get to the NCAA championship, I think Pat Pidden, by the end of this year, she's well on her way to becoming one of the best and most decorated golfers in the American and possibly in the country this year with how she's actually started out and certainly how she's played the last couple of years. Like, she's making the leap right now.
Strong team too. I think they're ranked in the top 30 in the rankings there, golf rankings there. Happy belated birthday to Emily Marin, head coach. Her birthday was a few days back, so it's got another. Her birthday wish is another stack team. She's got that very much. So they're in for another big year. Looks like.
Yeah. All right. So that'll do it for us on recapping. Did I miss anything, Eric? I don't think we did. Right?
No, man. Football's the occupies many of times.
NFL's underway. Gabe Davis is making the leap.
Depending on when people listen to this, too, the basketball conference schedule might be out. So
right, so that's what we're going to be looking for. And then also, Latavius Murray has signed with the practice squad with the New Orleans Saints 2 weeks in. First of all, what the hell took them so long? It's not like they don't need running back help back there. But it's good to see Tay get another shot.
Yeah, Latavius kind of interesting. Next Friday, scheduled to be inducted into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. All indications are he'll still make that appearance on Friday night. From indication sources, Bryce, that's why he's not with us. He's working on this stuff. All indications are he is still planning on going. We'll see if that sticks. Unfortunately for you, Jeffrey, I don't think you're going to be able to introduce him at the game. I don't think he's going to stick around for the game like the other Hall of Famers, as he's got a little job to all of a sudden.
Yeah, he's going to be a little busy, a little indisposed at the moment.
Yeah.
But we saw him actually do the uniform reveal for the opener, which was kind of cool. And now he's actually going to be playing again in black and gold, huh? How about that?
Good colors for him. It's worked out well for him. And we got a lot of content ready to go next week. Stay tuned on Black Gold Banneret. We're going to have a lot on the Hall of Famers and the Hall of Fame next week. I don't want to give away too much right now. Just keep an eye on it. We might have some special content coming out next week on that. Keep it on our social media platforms for all the details on that coming out.
Don't forget all the preview content that we have coming out for every football game every week, including for UCF FAU. It's no different. Down in Boca, 7:30 kick, CBS Sports Network. Eric, you guys will have night shift afterwards, I imagine.
Yeah. I think we'll have a full house. I think Drew's going to be there. Kyle will be there. So we'll have
you know what? I'm going to try and be there too.
You're more than welcome to be
Yeah,
here.
I'm
You can
not-
host. You can host. You haven't hosted one of those in a while. You can host.
I mean, we've had a bunch of home games. You know, okay, I'm busy trying to.
I mean,
that
just
down.
have some caffeine ready. It's a CBS Sports Network telecast, so it probably won't
fair.
be. We won't be done till probably midnight. But
Yeah, and then and hopefully we'll have a win to talk about in that game, which you'll be able to follow us on social media, as Eric was talking about. Twitter, UCF Banneret _SBN. Facebook, Black and Gold Banneret. Instagram, Black and Gold Banneret. And, of course, YouTube.com/Black and Gold Banneret, which is where you can find us on all of our social platforms. And, of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com, where we are your home for UCF sports on SB Nation. If you subscribe to our podcast, we thank you. Make sure you leave us a rating. If not, you can subscribe to us on Android and Apple, wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow all of us individually. Eric's at Eric Lopez Elo. I'm at Jeff _Sharon. You can follow Kyle at the SOTG for the student of the game. Follow Bryson at It's Bryson Turner. Follow Drew at Statboy Drew. And also don't forget to follow Noah Goldberg at the Noah Goldberg and Derek Warden at _DS Warden. Our two staff photographers doing a marvelous job once again, covering things for you, not just in football, but for all UCF sports, as we do. And we pride ourselves here at Black and Gold Banneret. So that'll do it for us. For Eric and all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, I'm Jeff, saying thank you so much for listening. If you're heading down to Boca, please drive safely. Enjoy the game. Go Knights. Charge on. We will see you on night shift on Saturday night.